What's going on? It's the Polygon Don here, and today I'm back with another 5 underrated classics for the PS3. I've got a mixed bag of genres for your perusal, so without further ado, let's get into it.
$10 million, guaranteed. That's the deal.
You'll have it. I just need more time.
Time's up.
50 Cent Blood on the Sand is a third-person cover-based shooter released in 2009 and serves as a sequel to the PS2 game 50 Cent Bulletproof. But if, like me, you didn't happen to play that PS2 game, fear not, you can very easily just jump straight into this. Now, to sum up the plot, and I might even be able to do this in a single sentence, so here we go. After a gig in an undisclosed Middle Eastern country with G-Unit in tow, Fiddy's payment, a diamond-encrusted skull, is stolen by a paramilitary group and he wants it back. That's it. That's all there is to it. So why is it on this list? Well, because ridiculously bare-bones story aside, the gameplay is genuinely really fun. It's not anything you haven't seen done a million times already, but the cover-based shooting mechanics are pretty competent and the gameplay loop addictive, if a little repetitive. The voice acting is so bad it's good, if you know what I mean, and having 50's back catalogue of music tracks accompany you as you blast and murder your way through the desert worked surprisingly well. If you happen to grow up listening to 50, then playing it again in 2023 will also tap into the nostalgia feels, and I found myself grinning like an idiot on numerous occasions as I played through it.
Eat this, pussy!
Gameplay, as already stated, is a third-person cover-based shooter, and it's not bringing anything new to the table even for back when it was released. You've got the usual suspects in terms of mechanics: take cover, shimmy left and right whilst in cover, jump over cover, blind fire, grenade, petrol bomb throws, etc, etc. You know what the deal is. There's co-op play too, but if you play solo you get to pick one of 3 members from G-Unit as your AI-controlled sidekick, and there wasn't any discerning differences between them that I could tell, so pick who you want there. They're all thick as 2 planks of wood and just bark 50's name all the time anyway.
Over here, 50! You're 50 up there! Your head's up, 50, on the road!
There's a decent amount of weapons to play around with. These can be bought by placing a call from phone boxes hidden in each level. You can also buy melee combat skills here too, as well as profanity packs or taunts. Yep, you can swear at your enemies as you shoot them in the face, and while I love that so very much, it also has the added benefit of increasing your score within the level. So yes, it is incredibly juvenile, but it's also actually worth doing. Weapons are classed in 4 categories and you can have one of each equipped at any given time. The categories are colour coded and ammo found in the level adopts this same colour code. So whether you have the Kalashnikov rifle or the Silenced M4 equipped, the ammo for either is still just yellow ammo boxes, for example, giving the game a much more arcadey vibe to it, which I definitely approve of in this instance. There is some variety in terms of what you actually have to do in each level, like some have you driving a Humvee as your sidekick is manning the onboard turret, while others have you in control of a minigun mounted to the side of a helicopter, mowing down anything that moves. Then there's the boss fights, which, if I'm being honest, left a lot to be desired. It's pretty much just a helicopter you have to take down, each time, every boss fight, helicopter. Which was fun in the first instance, but a little disappointing once the realisation sets in that that gimmick will be recycled again and again, and that's all you're getting in terms of the big action moments. You could probably thank 50's real-world son for that, as apparently after a visit to the dev studio to check on the game's development progression, 50's son requested more helicopters to be featured. Why they listened to a child, I have no idea. Charlie Brooker, the creator of Black Mirror, said it best when he reviewed this game in a previous life as a video game critic. There are plenty of atrocious cutscenes detailing a story that's impossible to care about, during which 50 Cent scowls a lot and generally behaves like a And he's not wrong, to be honest. However, while Mr. Brooker cared very little for this game and reviewed it poorly, I can't deny that despite its many flaws, I still had a really enjoyable time with it, and definitely recommend it as an underrated PS3 game worth checking out. Front Mission Evolved is a third-person shooter and mech fighting video game, or as this game calls them, Wanzers. Unlike previous entries in the Front Mission series, which span multiple console generations, Evolve changes up the gameplay and genre of its predecessors in a dramatic way, going from grid-based tactical RPG to third-person real-time action set in 3D environments, and at the time of release wasn't terribly well received, especially by the OG fans of the series. They wanted more of that tactical gameplay, and this ditched that entirely in favour of real-time combat. But if you go in knowing that and don't have that connection to what it once was, what you'll find is a decent mech combat game, albeit with some less than exemplary on-foot segments, that in my book could have very easily been left out of the game completely. Story-wise, you'll be playing as engineer Dylan Ramsey, who is out test driving a prototype Wanzer when his base is attacked by an unknown enemy. Racing back and desperate to investigate, Dylan is also keen to ensure that his father, who is currently in said base, is safe and secure. Now, I won't say what happens next, but you can probably guess, and it inevitably leads to Dylan joining the army in what can only be described as the swiftest and most irresponsible army recruitment draft ever. The story is slightly generic and predictable most of the time, but with the campaign only lasting around 7 hours, it doesn't outstay its welcome. That short runtime will probably have played a part in those negative reviews too, but as someone who plays a lot of games, I do not shun a short and sweet campaign. Gameplay is pretty much instantly enjoyable and very easy to pick up, whether you're a fan of the genre or not. Enemy AI is decent enough, but friendly AI, not so much. They don't do a ton of damage, and I swear they just wander off when they can't be bothered. I'm swinging my camera around trying to find them and they're nowhere in sight, or they're cowering behind a wall and not engaging the enemy at all. With that said, you still shouldn't have an issue dispatching the wave after wave of enemy Wanzers the game throws at you. Levels are linear, but the level design is decent and varied enough that this wasn't really an issue. You can customize your mech with different body parts and weapons that affect the attributes and fighting capabilities of your Wanzer, which in turn adds some replayability, as you can return to previously beaten levels with different loadouts, etc. You can also customize your Wanzer aesthetically, which is a nice touch and adds some personality to your bipedal fighting machine. There are boss fights, and while they're usually the highlight moments for me in video games, I have to admit that's not the case with Front Mission Evolved. I found the balance between you and the bosses in the game to be way off. They're just far too bullet spongy and take so long to put down. This affected the overall pace of the game dramatically in my opinion, and just weren't as fun as some of the standard wave-based missions, which was quite surprising for me as traditionally I'm not a wave-based gameplay kind of guy at all. This particular game is probably going to be a divisive one, as it really did get hammered by critics and players alike when it was released back in 2010. While the cutscenes look great, the gameplay graphics just weren't putting the PS3's cell architecture through its paces, and at times looks more like a PS2 game. As someone paying full price for this 13 years ago, I may well have agreed with the general consensus, but being a fan of mech combat, a pool of games that is far too shallow for my liking, I picked this up for next to nothing over a decade later and had a great time with it. There isn't enough here to warrant recommending this to absolutely everyone, but if like me you have a soft spot for tiny humans in big machines kicking 7 shades of out of each other, then you should definitely give this a go and not rule it out, despite the hate it got from reviewers at launch. Definitely keep an eye out for it next time you're game hunting, because at the right price there's still a lot of fun to be had here.
Glad to have you back, Kilo. Let's get you in the chair. Security, go ahead and clean up the proving grounds. Sit down, Kilo. I need your post-mission stats.
And next up we have Syndicate by Starbreeze Studios, a first-person cyberpunk shooter released in 2012 and published by EA. First off, let me just say what an incredibly good looking game this is. Plays absolutely brilliantly too. Now as you know, first person shooters aren't exactly my forte, they don't tend to feature in my videos all that much as I generally don't play them that often. Unless there's a twist or a gimmick involved. Straight up war sim shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield for example have never really interested me on the whole. But if you throw in some extra mechanics like demon arms a la the Darkness 1 and 2 or mech piloting segments like in Titanfall 2, then you got my attention. Syndicate falls into that latter category and follows that trend with aplomb. A reboot of the real-time tactics series of the same name, this plays entirely differently, obviously, and I can't imagine fans of the original were all too pleased at that change back in 2012 when it was released. However, as an outsider and someone playing this for the first time not all that long ago, I honestly cannot believe why this isn't featured in more people's lists. It looks phenomenal for its age, the gunplay feels and sounds punchy, the guns themselves are modelled well and have a decent feeling recoil to them. The extra hacking type abilities you get and unlock as you progress are all really imaginative and allow for some strategic and creative ways of taking down your enemies. There is a lot to applaud this game for in my opinion, and I really can't understand why this didn't get the love it clearly deserved. Story is good too and features A-list Hollywood acting talent by way of Rosario Dawson and Brian Cox. Set in 2069, corporations have outgrown nations in terms of wealth and influence, and corporate espionage is big business in this new, corrupted and deceitful world. You'll be playing as Miles Kilo, an augmented agent working for one of these corporations, as you are given tasks to complete and hit list targets to eliminate. You get the standard mechanics of shooters from this era: run, jump, slide, take cover, etc. And the game features around 20 different weapons you can get your hands on, such as the familiar assault rifles and rocket launchers, but also available are the more futuristic weapon varieties like the Gauss gun, whose bullets can track enemies automatically, and the Riot Lance, which can immobilize foes for a short while. All weapons can be upgraded and customized with attachments and upgrade options, and these can quite dramatically alter the weapon's abilities, transforming standard ammunition to cover penetrating ammunition, for example. Level design was also surprisingly good and notable, with enemy placement and crafty spawn points constantly keeping you on your toes, making for some really sweaty and frenetic shootouts. But the really cool stuff comes into effect with the augmented Dart 6 microchip that Miles is equipped with. This grants Miles hacking and breaching abilities and tags enemies, making them visible via an augmented heads-up display. You can use the Dart 6 chip to hack into enemies' minds and control their actions, such as the ability Backfire, which causes the enemy weapons to malfunction, stunning them temporarily, or the Persuade ability, which makes the selected enemy an ally for a short period of time, turning their guns on their teammates before turning it on themselves. They're not OP abilities and can't be spammed due to cooldowns, and with only 3 to choose from did feel a little lacking at first, but the ones you do have access to can change the course of the battle in an instant and were always satisfying to use. There are other more passive abilities to the Dart 6, like scanning to locate enemies hiding behind cover, etc., and each ability and skill can be upgraded or enhanced by collecting and extracting the chips of fallen enemies, mainly bosses. Boss fights are standout moments too, as these enemies tend to have their own Dart 6 chip and therefore extra skills and abilities that you have to bear in mind and overcome in order to beat, resulting in climaxes that were both memorable and challenging. Seriously, I was quite blown away by the level of detail and polish in this fantastic game. If you have a PS3 and are yet to play this, then definitely grab a copy. You can still get it for cheap and it's well worth a slot in your collection.
Tango's approaching. We need to shake off.
Shit. Okay, lead plan B up to me.
Receiving coordinates from Agent Merritt. Receiving Eurocorp upgrade protocol. Firmware updated.
Just listen to me. I know this is just a short commercial, but there's a big-time director, Richard Langston. He's on set. He's looking for a driver for his next film.
Okay, they're ready for you now.
This is your shot to get your foot in the door. 3, don't blow it. Roll camera. 1, action.
Easy. Hey, man. Whoa. Look out!
Cut. Great work. Clean him up. Excellent, kid. You pulled it off. Langston wants to hire you and he starts filming tomorrow. So get packed, because we got a plane to catch.
Alright, so next up we have Stuntman Ignition, which sees you as a new and up-and-coming stunt driver trying to make it big in Hollywood. You'll be increasing your renown and status by driving an array of different vehicle types through incredibly perilous situations with precision and panache. And I mean precision. A calm head, steady hands and sharp eyes are key here and will be required if you want to see the game through to its later stages. The game features 6 fictional films, and they all very closely resemble and parody actual Hollywood blockbusters that you might already be familiar with. The first movie, Aftershock, is basically a disaster film like Volcano, A Whoopin' and a Hollerin' is essentially Dukes of Hazzard, and Strike Force Omega is in the vein of the A-Team, etc. You get the idea, it's all very tongue-in-cheek. The 6 fake movies each have 6 separate scenes that require your skilled expertise. Your goal will be to complete the objectives set out to you by the director with as little mistakes as possible. Make too many errors or drive your car out of shot and you'll get an angry demand from the director to reshoot. Depending on how well you accomplish the objectives will determine your score at the end of the scene. You can also string stunts together and incorporate additional ones to increase your stunt multiplier, and therefore your score. Pretty much anything you can do to add danger into the mix is a plus in this game. Drive extra close to objects, drift round every corner and stay airborne for as long as possible after a jump will add to your overall score. After each scene, your performance is evaluated and you are given a star rating based on that score, with a maximum of 5 stars available each scene. Achieving stars also adds to the player's rank, which increases as the game progresses and in turn unlocks future movies and their respective scenes. It's just good old-fashioned mindless fun, and each movie brings with it its own set of vehicles and environments that do all feel unique to each other. One moment you're in a Dodge Charger type vehicle skidding around bends and jumping off ramps, and the next you might be on a motorbike doing wheelies and squeezing through incredibly tight gaps at breakneck speeds. One mission even had me behind the wheel of a missile launcher as I ploughed my way through the desert. All the vehicles control differently, so you never really get to rest on your laurels. It can be a bit frustrating at times though, especially in the harder stages later in the game. The precision required will likely have you restarting the scene a hell of a lot before you nail it, and thankfully this is done via very quick menu select and is almost instantaneous. I mean, it would have to be with a game like this to be honest, otherwise the frustration would be unbearable, but thankfully it is swift. So yes, there will be a lot of restarting and retrying the same level over and over, but even then it's still quite enjoyable to inch further and further into the scene, memorising the movement patterns of the other vehicles and hazards, slowly becoming one with the flow of the scene until you master it and perfect the run. It's an early PS3 release and cross-generational, with it also available on the PS2, so as a result it does show its age here and there looks-wise, but to be honest, if the gameplay's good, that kind of stuff has never really bothered me, and the gameplay in this is solid. There aren't exactly that many stunt driver specific games out there, and this is a decent example of one, so if you like what you see, grab a copy next time you see it.
Jump the logs! Jump into the tower! Hit the police car! Close to the semi! Hit the jump! Use action! Grubs, did you see that? This guy's so much cooler than you!
Shut up, dude!
At the midpoint on the journey of life, I found myself in a dark forest, for the clear path was lost.
Published by EA and developed by Visceral Games, the studio behind the Dead Space franchise, Dante's Inferno is a hack-and-slash action game set in the 7 Circles of Hell. While it borrows some of the horror DNA from the Dead Space series, the story's main source of inspiration is from the 14th century literary works of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, while the gameplay is clearly heavily inspired by the God of War series. You'll play as the titular Dante, a Templar knight fresh from the bloody battlefields of the Crusades, as he fights his way through hell to rescue the love of his life, Beatrice, from the clutches of Lucifer himself. After a great opening/tutorial segment where Dante faces off and eventually defeats Death, the Grim Reaper, Dante claims Death's scythe as his spoil of war, which in turn becomes his main weapon of choice throughout the rest of the game. The scythe will allow you to combo attacks together as well as deal devastating finishing blows, and all have incredible animations to them and feel really satisfying to pull off each time. More can be unlocked too, as defeated enemies drop souls, which is this game's form of currency, and can be used to upgrade and unlock even more abilities for Dante. He also has a holy cross which acts as a kind of ranged weapon to bring down airborne enemies, sending out holy energy in the form of spirited crucifixes that can also be upgraded to deal more damage or cast a wider area of attack. The gameplay is fun, it's more than fun, it's incredibly enjoyable, but for me the standout element to this game is its setting and world design. It's truly horrifying and an excellent depiction of hell. There are some really incredibly goth looking settings here. For example, the lost souls of the damned are trapped in the walls you traverse through and wail in pain and desperation as you pass over them. The enemy designs are grotesque and crooked after an eternity of damnation, and the added twist of encountering real-world historical figures who are also trapped there was also enjoyable to stumble upon, especially as the game gives you the opportunity to either absolve them or punish them for their sins. Absolving them grants you holy XP, while punishing them will net you unholy XP, with both avenues having their own skill trees and therefore abilities, leaving the choice up to you in which road you want to go down. Each area or circle of hell is themed: gluttony, lust, greed, etc., and the enemies within them follow and reflect that thematically. Enemies in gluttony are bloated, while enemies in lust are kind of lustful in a hellish, nightmarish kind of way, most of which I can't even show here due to the amount of nudity and absurdity on display, but suffice it to say the game utilises the source material's themes in very interesting and inventive ways. This was largely looked upon as a God of War clone at the time of release, and there's no denying its similarities in gameplay, but this has more than enough going for it to keep it interesting, and to be honest, if the action or the game feel is up to snuff, then who cares? And let me tell you, Dante's Inferno more than handles itself in that department. The combat is fast, buttery smooth and incredibly enjoyable. The 7 circles of hell that serve as the game's setting is dark, twisted and fascinating to journey through, and the medieval time period and source material it borrows from makes that journey even more intriguing. To write this off as just a God of War clone is a huge disservice to this incredibly polished and entertaining hack and slash game. If you're in the mood for an action game where you get to mindlessly cleanse the underworld of its malformed monstrosities, then look no further. This game's got you covered, and I'm sure you'll be more than pleased with the results. Also, side note here, there's an accompanying DVD and Blu-ray release of animation that delves into the world and lore of Dante's Inferno even more, so it might be worth keeping an eye out and grabbing a copy if you see that too. And there you have it, another 5 underrated PS3 games for you to consider adding to your collections. Man, I love this system, it's still so good to collect for. And I also just want to take this time to thank everyone who's subscribed and watched the channel so far. I recently broke the 1000 subs benchmark and I couldn't be happier, to be honest. So thank you all for making that possible, I'm truly flattered. But until next time people, take care, be good and game on.